Hello everyone, welcome to the multiplayer panel for StarCraft 2. My name is David Kim. Here with me today are Alex Sun, Aaron Larson, and Aaron Kirkpatrick. We are a few of the members on the multiplayer design team. So today, we're going to be talking about the design goals that we had for Legacy of the Void for those of you out there that haven't been paying close attention to what we've been doing during the beta, as well as how we kind of fulfill these goals. And then we'll go into the heavy community collaboration efforts that we've been putting into the development of Legacy of the Void, how that worked out so well, and what it means in this area going forward. And then finally, we'll talk about the very details of the ladder revamp system that we're going to be working on right after the release of Legacy of the Void. So let's get started with design goals. StarCraft 2 multiplayer has the highest skilled players playing the game, but not only that, StarCraft 2 is a game that has unlimited skill ceiling. And not just StarCraft 2 players out there, but also gamers of other games have said things like StarCraft 2 is the most competitive game in the world. And we kind of agree with those types of statements to describe StarCraft 2 multiplayer. And that is why we focus so much of our efforts on having these other modes as well, because we want StarCraft 2 as a whole to become a game that caters to every single type of gamer out there. And that's why we have a full campaign experience. We have the arcade where you can play so many different types of games. And in Legacy of the Void, we're doing things like co-op missions, Archon mode, automated tournaments that allow you to play with players of your own skill level. So even if you're not a pro level player, you can kind of experience the tournament experience against players that you can actually have a good chance against. So in order to fulfill on these things that I talked about, these were the specific goals that we had for Legacy of the Void. First is more action. We believe this one is very important because StarCraft 2 is a game that you play thousands or tens of thousands of games across 5 to 10 years or even more than that. So we want every game feeling very different, and the more action there is in a given game, more likely that each game will feel very different. We also wanted a faster paced game, and for this we also wanted to reduce the downtime where you're just doing the same sort of decisions every single game, and there's not a lot of strategic choice. We wanted to eliminate those types of moments as well. And for micro on both sides, this one is important to us because back in Wings of Liberty, we realized that players, both when they're playing the game or when they're watching a pro tournament, they would kind of conclude who the winner is depending on the supply count. So if someone was ahead by 30 supply, then we would just say, oh, he already won the game. No point in watching anymore, or no point in playing because he's ahead by so much. So by having this goal and putting more emphasis on engagements and micro, the better player can actually come out ahead even if he falls behind by 30 supply or even 40 supply and so on. And we wanted to add different types of micro in Legacy of the Void so that players can have more tools to show off their skill with. And finally, we wanted to explore major redesigns in major systems such as the econ system, the macro mechanics, as well as Protoss warping changes. So we just had so much that we wanted to do, but let's talk a little bit about one example per one of these goals, even though there are many examples that we can talk about. So for more action, we want to talk about the new Adept. It's a Protoss unit, early game. You can build it pretty early game. And it's a great unit for harassment early on, especially against Zerg when they're just econing up, making drones with a few queens and a limited number of base defenses. So let's check it out in action. So as you can see, the Adepts have used their psionic transfer ability to get to the behind of the mineral line. And the adepts would actually ignore the queen and go straight for the drones. Because they can actually two-shot the drones, they're really strong at early game harassment. So Protoss players now are kind of incentivized to go on the offense rather than just sitting back. For faster pace, we want to show a comparison video of what a Terran opening looked like in Heart of the Swarm versus what it looks like now in Legacy of the Void. The reason we wanted to make this change is because in Heart of the Swarm, every single game at the start, you build one worker, you wait, you build another worker, you wait, and it was this repetitive but mandatory process where there's no choices, there's no strategic decisions, so we wanted to speed that up a little bit. So on the left side, you're looking at Heart of the Swarm. On the right side is Legacy of the Void. And even from the beginning, the difference is very noticeable. And we just really wanted to focus on the moment the decisions are made to be happening as fast as possible. So you'll see that in Legacy of the Void, the first building already started to go up. And right when that building finishes, the first choice is made. So you can choose to go for an expansion, you can build 2 barracks and go for a marine push, or you can actually tech into by making a refinery right after the barracks. So in this video, you'll see that right when the supply depot finishes, the Legacy of the Void side is building a barracks and the refinery, whereas on the Heart of the Swarm side, only the first building is just starting to be built. For micro on both sides, we want to showcase a new Protoss unit called the Disruptor. What the Disruptor does is it shoots out this projectile that blows up and deals high amount of splash damage. And the cool thing about the Disruptor is the person that's using it can actually micro the shot for maximum effectiveness. And on the flip side, the player who's using the roaches are trying to mitigate the damage by splitting their roaches. So let's check it out in action. So the Disruptor on the right side killed 4 roaches, the one on the right killed only 1. So as you can see here, depending on who the better player is at micro, this engagement could have went all the way from a complete Protoss victory to a complete Zerg victory or anything else in between like you saw in the video. For different types of micro, we want to showcase a new Zerg unit. It's the Ravager. What this unit does is it shoots out this high damage attack in a very small radius. So if you use it against a unit like the Siege Tank, if this was Heart of the Swarm, the Siege Tanks just have to sit there and take the shot and be killed. But in Legacy of the Void, you can actually pick it up with medevacs and do some cool micro against something like this. So the Ravager shots have been fired at the Siege Tank, but the Siege Tank dodges it using the medevac. And the one major redesign we want to focus on is the Protoss Warp-In. Although we explored other things such as the econ changes as well as the macro mechanics changes, we wanted to talk about this one mostly because in terms of strategy, we feel like this has made a huge difference because back in Heart of the Swarm, all the Protoss player really needed to do was put up a pylon somewhere nearby to the entrance of the enemy's base, and you could just choose to go all in at any moment of the game. So we're not really saying that all-ins are necessarily a bad thing, but we wondered if we can kind of reduce the number of all-ins that Protoss players can do so that they can have a little bit more of long-term planning, strategizing, as well as some positional play. So let's check out what this looked like in Heart of the Swarm. The Marines kill all the Stalkers, but the Protoss player just warps in 8 Zealots and just kills all the Marines. Just because there was like a pylon up there on the cliff, he was able to do this. But now let's check out the exact same scenario in Legacy of the Void. The same number of Marines going up against the exact same number of Protoss units, but as you can see, the Stalkers are all killed, and then the Marines take care of all the Zealots. So in this specific scenario, maybe the Protoss player could have warped in the Zealots on top of the ramp, and then brought the Zealots down for a more favorable engagement. So this type of positional play, we believe, is a much cooler warp-in experience compared to the one we had in Heart of the Swarm. So aside from the one example that we gave per goal that we had, we did so much more on top of that. So when we started Legacy of the Void development, we kind of asked ourselves, there's so much more that we want to do in Legacy of the Void compared to what we did in Heart of the Swarm. So how can we get there? And the answer was to work together with our passionate community out there who are genuinely looking to make StarCraft 2 better. And we also said, what if we do that? And we also have a longer beta so that we have more time to explore many big changes to make Legacy of the Void as awesome as possible. So now, Aaron Kirkpatrick will talk about the lessons that we learned, some difficulties that we had, and what it means going forward in the area of community collaboration. Thank you.
Hey everyone. So to start out, I want to talk a little bit more about what David was just saying regarding the community. This is, we think, not only a passionate group, but it is one of the most dedicated communities out there. The StarCraft community built esports as we know it, and years later, you guys still pack tournament halls. Some of you even organize and run your own tournaments. We see a ton of maps being made for the ladder and the arcade all the time. There are talk shows about the game and its future. Really, the map and mod makers, the streamers, the casters, the players, everyone, you all bring a level of commitment that is just unlike any other community. Of course, not everyone is like this. There will always be some people in any given community that are going to be loud and negative no matter what happens, but we've noticed that in the StarCraft community, you've done a great job of keeping a constructive atmosphere and really encouraging a lot of, useful feedback and ways to improve the game. And we don't think that this is an accident. We think this is because all of you really just want StarCraft 2 to be the most amazing game that it can be. So we wanted to connect with all of you. We wanted to reach out and help you contribute to really make all of you a part of our development team. Of course, that's a pretty big challenge. We're really badly outnumbered. So how do we bring in all of you, all of these people spread across the entire world, and make everyone a part of the development process? Well, we figured a good first step is more transparency. If you're going to help, you need to know what we're working on. Now, in the past, we have made forum posts talking about upcoming changes and our reasoning behind them, but it takes more than this. You need to see our internal discussions and take part in them. And that needs to be a two-way conversation. If we just listen to your feedback, discuss it amongst ourselves, and then take action, there's no way for you to know that you were actually a part of this process, that your voice does matter. In that same vein, we can't just discuss the topics that we think are the most important. We need to listen to what the community thinks are the critical issues. By going over where the game is going in detail and talking about what all of your concerns are, everyone gains more insight into why changes are being made, and that really just results in a better feedback process. So this is part of what we mean when we talk about iteration and polish. We're not just looking to make our games better and better over time, we're also looking to improve our own skill sets and processes. And by being more open, it's a lot easier for all of you to help us improve, and that can only be good for the game. Of course, as great as that all sounds, the real question is, what did we actually do and what came of it? Well, we communicated a lot more than once a week. And this included forum posts like we'd made in the past, but going into a lot more detail and covering any topic that we saw being discussed. And it wasn't just these posts talking about upcoming changes, it was also individual responses to people who had questions or comments on forums or Reddit, Twitter, etc. And in addition to this online effort, we also held community summits. For these, we flew in a bunch of really dedicated and outspoken community leaders from a ton of different regions, and we shared our upcoming plans with them. Then we sat down face to face and discussed those plans along with any other topics that they were passionate about. All of this conversation has resulted in direct changes to the game. To start with, we've made a ton of changes to units. One of my favorite examples of this is the Disruptor. Early on in the beta, we received very consistent feedback that although people really liked the micro involved with the unit, it felt a little bit too all or nothing. If you might recall, in the beginning of the beta, the disruptor itself, rather than launching a projectile that you can control, you would move the disruptor itself into the enemy army. And that meant that you either wiped out the entire enemy army with your disruptors, or they're now behind enemy lines and they're probably all going to die. So we discussed this. We then shared our discussion, asked everyone out there what they think, and we built off of everyone's comments and suggestions to propose some changes to make to the beta. One of the things we started with was saying maybe we can make it easier to rescue the disruptor after it detonates, but make it so that the explosion isn't quite as extreme. And that meant that we got really great feedback when we tested this. We heard from people, yeah, you know, mission accomplished. It feels less all or nothing, but it's still not perfect. Now it feels like most of the micro is in the Protoss player's hands, and there's not a lot the other person can do to combat it. So we continued the conversation. We built off of everyone's feedback and suggestions, and eventually we ended up redesigning the unit into what we have now, which is just a lot better, and it's working out to be a lot more fun. And we repeated this process with a ton of different units. It even gave us a brand new unit. The Terran's Liberator would not have been good enough to ship if it were not for the detailed thoughts and feedback that we received from all of you. I really can't stress how much of a long shot getting this unit up to the state that it's in really was. You might recall that in the heart of the Swarm beta, we ended up cutting the Warhound, and we couldn't quite get anything up to the high bar that we have that is a StarCraft 2 multiplayer unit. In Legacy of the Void, not only did we reach that bar, but with your help, I think this has actually become one of the most interesting units in the game right now. But we didn't just work on units. We also worked on all of the game mechanics changes that David was talking about earlier. For example, the economy changes. It was due to some really great analysis done and sent to us that had us look at the economy in the first place. And it was all of the in-depth testing and responses that we got during the beta that helped us walk a really fine line between encouraging more expansions and having more aggression and making the game just feel way too fast-paced, which is something that we didn't want. The warp-in changes as well. This was actually a pretty difficult thing, but by working together, we were able to not only make this more tactical and not as prone to all-in strategies, but also it's still strong defensively and it keeps the game stable. Probably the most heated topic that we've had so far is the changes to make macro mechanics more accessible. This was something that came up at one of the first community summits we had. We heard that mechanics like Inject Larva and Protoss's Chrono Boost are really, really important. In fact, so important that it feels like you have to be doing them rather than anything else in the game whenever the moment comes up to use them. And so it can feel like a burden that you have to, you know, force yourself through in order to play the fun parts. And we thought this was really interesting feedback, so we opened the discussion to everyone online. And we heard a ton of feedback from a ton of people, by far the most engagement we've ever got, and we got a very clear message that the community was entirely split on this issue. No one out there could agree on this. Some people loved the macro mechanics, some people hated them, people had different ideas about whether we should redesign them, whether we should scrap them. But this was actually, well, it could have been a disaster. It turned out great, because people gave us so much detailed feedback about what they liked, what they didn't like, and tested out all of the iterations, even the things they didn't particularly think would work. We ended up building off of all of this to make changes that we hope make these changes, make these mechanics more forgiving, but also still have a lot of strategic decision making and are really important at the top level of play. But more than that, something really interesting came up while we were looking into this issue. We received feedback that while we were testing a more scaled down version of macro mechanics, that players actually really liked the pace of the game, regardless of how easy to use or not these mechanics were. And when we thought about it, it made a lot of sense. The economy changes that we had made, they not only started the action quicker, they also caused army sizes to ramp up a lot faster as well, which meant that early skirmishes ended pretty quickly and you quickly got catapulted into the mid-game. With the macro mechanics scaled down, your army sizes don't grow quite as quickly, so there's a longer period of skirmishes, and people found this to be a lot of fun. So in addition to making these mechanics a little more approachable, we also scaled them down a bit to create a smoother pace throughout the game. And I just think this is a really cool thing that happened, because it shows that not only is community collaboration useful for solving specific issues that come up, it's also a powerful tool that we can use to explore design, and it's something that I think we're going to have a lot of fun with in the future. So now the beta's over, and we've taken some time to look back at how things went, and it's pretty clear to us this process has just been really invaluable. We got way more feedback from the community, really great quality feedback, and this has allowed us to accomplish more in this beta period than we ever have before. In addition to that, we also got a lot more feedback and interaction from pro players, and this wasn't something we really expected. We had plans to work with them more, but it's always been a little bit difficult to get feedback from pros because they're so focused on whatever their next match is that it's hard for them to take the time out to look at a particular balanced test map or some new thing we want to try. So what we found was that with the community discussing all of these topics every single week, they couldn't help but get sucked into the process, and we found that a lot of pros were sending us their feedback of their own accord, which has been really, really helpful. So this process has just gone great. And I think one of the coolest things about it is that we haven't been doing it for that long, which means that we still have a lot of room to improve as we move forward. So let's talk about moving forward. So Legacy of the Void is going to ship in just a few more days. I feel like a kid before Christmas. Yeah. And although the beta is over, this process of community collaboration is still going to continue, but it will look a little bit different. As the game goes live and we have a ton of players filling into the servers, we're going to be focusing more on balance, which means there will be fewer topics to discuss and we might not be communicating as frequently. But the goal is still more open communication. We want to share our thoughts on where each matchup is early and often, and we want to try and start testing changes to things that appear like they might be a problem before we're really certain, to make sure that in the future, once these problems come up, we're ready to tackle them as quickly as we possibly can. Now, this isn't something that we've done in the past before, not during a balance period, so we're going to have to figure it out as we go. But we think there's a lot to be gained by sharing our thoughts early and often with all of you and working together to solve any issues that come up. It's also worth mentioning that this focus on balance is actually just one phase of development. There's still a lot on the horizon for StarCraft 2. And if you missed it, the Future of StarCraft 2 panel actually went into some more detail about our thoughts for future times with big changes. And as we go into these times, we're going to once again be reaching out to all of you to get all of your thoughts, your feedback, your testing, and your ideas, so that we can try and make sure that any features we try end up being as great as possible by working with, together with all of you. So to talk about one of those first areas of major changes, Aaron Larson is going to come up here and chat a bit about the ladder.
Hello, friends. So I'm going to be talking to you guys about what our goals are for the ladder revamp. Now, before I get started, I do need to give you guys a disclaimer. You know, this is very early in the process. All this stuff is subject to change, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that we want to do, though, by talking about this so early is to get your thoughts about it, get your feedback on it, and be able to iterate on that and include that into our design. So if you missed the other panel, the Future of StarCraft 2 panel, we talked a lot about you know, our continuing support for Legacy of the Void post-launch. So this is the multiplayer team's top priority post-launch. All right, so diving into the goals. First up, as Aaron was talking about, the community collaboration stuff that we did for the Legacy of the Void beta has been awesome for us. It really helped us out, and we want to continue this process going forward. So what that means for the ladder is we want to hear your ideas. We want to hear what you like. We want to hear what you don't like about our current ladder. We want to know, you know, what we can do to improve it. So with that said, we know we want to move in a direction that provides more accuracy and transparency to the player. The StarCraft 2 multiplayer experience really is, sort of that ultimate test of skill. No matter how much you play, you can always get better. So when we include a ranked mode for this, that means it really attracts a lot of the most competitive players out there. And the competitive players, they really want to see where they stack up against their competition. So we have an example here of something that's working pretty decently for us for this goal, our league system. Here you can see gold versus silver. It's pretty clear to tell, who's the better player. And the way the medals work, they sort of communicate where you are, like roughly your skill level, and that's working pretty well for us. The problem is when we start comparing players within the same league, it doesn't quite work the same, and that's mostly due to the way that divisions work. So you might look at this and think, well, rank 52's got to be better than rank 64, right? Well, not necessarily. Because it's somewhat random which division you get placed in, some divisions can be a lot more competitive than others. You could get placed in a division that's a lot less active, so those people might not be spending the bonus pool, and if you're just active playing a bunch of games, you can shoot up pretty high. So that's an example of something that we do want to improve. And our last goal here is we really want a system that can accommodate a wide range of skill levels. And so what I mean by that is that the needs of a Grandmaster player from this system are really different from the needs of a bronze level player. A Grandmaster player is going to want to see, exactly where they rank within the region. They want to see, like, I'm the 71st best player in the region. And that number makes a lot of sense to them. It provides a lot of meaning within that context of being a Grandmaster. Now, if you take that same number and you put it on a bronze level player, they see a ridiculously high number that just basically means how many people are playing in that season. That number doesn't mean anything. So what does a bronze level player want to see? Well, they're trying to get better at the game, so how about we tell them a little bit more about how much they're improving by? Maybe give them better goals as far as, like, if you keep playing and you keep doing this well, then you can get into silver, and really help communicate that a little bit better. All right, so those are our big 3 goals. And with that, I'm going to pass this off to Alex Sun, who's going to talk about some of the details of this system.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. So once we figured out what our goals were going to be, we started thinking about solutions to address some of these issues, and we're ready to share some of those ideas with you today. So when we think about the ladder, we really like to think about it in 3 sections: top, middle, and bottom. And to help illustrate what we mean about top, middle, and bottom, we have this graph. Now, to the left of the blue line, that small little area there, that's what we mean by bottom. In between the blue line and the red line, that big area there, that's our middle. And this is where the vast majority of our players live, over 90%. To the right of that red line, that's our top players. That's the equivalent of, like, masters. So we're looking at our top tier issues. One of the things that we definitely want to address is the fact that GM isn't necessarily filled with our top players. And this is because, we have a limited number of slots, 200, and once players get in, they stay in there unless they become inactive. Now, this means that some of our best players out there, they were stuck in Masters just because there was no slot that ever opened up for them. And the best example I can give you is, like, some of our pro players out there, they were going to the events, participating in tournaments, and they missed their opportunity to get into GM, and then they were just stuck in Masters for the rest of the season. So this is something we definitely want to address. We want to make sure that we have a meaningful top GM ladder. Another big issue is the fact that like Aaron was saying, our ranks, they really don't mean that much. They don't really represent skill. In fact, your rank largely depended on luck, which is really weird, where the ladder is supposed to be a skill-based system, right? And so it's like, yeah, if you get into a division that's not very active, or it's not as difficult, you don't have as skilled players in there, you won't rank up. You might rank up high, just not through sheer luck. And hey, you might get rank 10 in Masters just by the fact that there's only 10 people in your Masters division. So we definitely wanted to make ranks represent skill. And so what are we thinking? Well, what we'd like to do is we'd like to combine Grandmaster and all of the Masters divisions into one large division. They would just show up in one large contiguous list. And so what we mean by this is like top 200 players, GM, and then rank 201, that's where Masters begins. And so, if you're ranked 201, that means you're the 201st best player on the service. Ranks become extremely meaningful now. And once we do this, it does mean that, Grandmaster will be updating in real time, not like it is now. So if you happen to get into Grandmasters, grats to you. But you're not going to be able to rest on your laurels like you are now. There's going to be people below you constantly trying to bump you out and prove that they belong in there and you don't. Overall, we feel like this experience, it really speaks to the competitive experience that we want for StarCraft 2, and it goes well with our goals of accuracy. Moving on to our mid-tier issues. So, what issues do the guys in the middle have that people don't have up at the top? Well, if you're at the top, you're at the top. There's nowhere else to go. If you're in the middle, you want to know, how do I get to the top? How do I progress? What percentile am I in, and how far am I from getting promoted into the next league? And help illustrate, kind of the issues that we had. We have this graph again, and if you look, here's silver. If you look at the x-axis skill, that skill gap from bottom silver to top silver, that's pretty wide. So, if you start off towards the bottom of silver and, your skill is improving, you're getting better, yet you're still in silver, you're like, what's happening? You want to know. So what do we want to do here? Well, similar to, Masters and Grandmasters, we want to get rid of that concept of the 100-player divisions and just combine them and have 10 skill-based divisions instead. So this means if you get placed into like Silver 1, congrats, that means you're at the top of silver. You're the best in silver, and you're probably not too far from gold. But if you are in Silver 1, you're probably still curious, well, am I at the bottom of Silver 1? Am I at the top? How far am I to getting promoted into gold? And to help with that, we want to look at, at how ranks are sorted out and how you get points. And basically we want to revisit bonus pool. Like Aaron was saying, like people who were using up their bonus pool, they can get really high up in the ranks and surpass a lot of other people who are a lot more skilled by them. So, we want to either get rid of bonus pool entirely or drastically reduce it. And once we do that, ranks become extremely meaningful, and you'll know, like, if you're rank 10 in Silver 1, it actually means that you're rank 10 in Silver 1, and there is some more. You have to improve even a little more in order to get into gold. All right, moving on to the bottom tier. So bottom, if you look at the graph here, we were looking at the issues that we were having. We really looked back to Wings of Liberty and the mistakes that we make there. And here you can clearly see, like in Wings of Liberty, we had the population set to 20%. And look again, like at that x-axis, that skill. There's a huge disparity between the bottom bronze players and the people who are, on the borderline between bronze and silver. If you look at that disparity, it's basically like this skill disparity between silver and platinum players. So what was happening in Wings of Liberty was, players who were starting off towards the bottom of bronze, they were watching the Day 9 videos, watching the Apollo videos, they were getting better. The equivalent of like going from silver to platinum, and yet what was happening? They were stuck in bronze. Blizzard was not recognizing the fact that their skill was increasing so much. And they were just stuck in our lowest league. It's very discouraging. So what do we want to do here? We think the 10 skill-based divisions is going to help a lot here. If you get put into Bronze 6, you improve. You go into Bronze 5. Congrats, you've made some progress. And, hey, you're in Bronze 5. That's not the lowest. Bronze 10's the lowest. We think this will help, but in order to really solve the issue, what we feel like we really should do is just recognize the players for actually improving and give them what they deserve, and that's actually a promotion. And in order to do that, we want to make bronze a little bit smaller. So, you know, this doesn't mean that we're gonna make bronze so small that only like 1 or 2 people are in it, and you know, hey, grats, you got into silver, you know, and then silver becomes the new bronze. That's definitely not our intent here. What we just want to do is, like I said before, really recognize those players. That players whose skill has increased, you know, the equivalent of like going from silver to platinum, we want to recognize them and give them the promotion that they deserve. So in Wings of Liberty, we had the value set at 20%. In Heart of the Swarm, we made it 8%. We're still not exactly sure what the right percentage is for the future. We're going to take a look at it, but basically our goal here is to make it not feel so impossible that, you know, you're going to be stuck in bronze forever, and give players a proper recognition. So those are the ladder ideas. If you guys have any questions, now is a good time to start lining up. We definitely want to hear the feedback that you guys have. We really appreciate all the feedback you guys have given in the past, you know, being part of the development process. Everything that we talked about here, nothing is final. Like we said, we want to get your feedback. We want to incorporate it in. And I want to thank you so much for helping us make StarCraft 2 what it is today. Thank you.
Hey, the question is about Chrono Boost when you have more than one Nexus. So, for example, when you take your NAT, you have 2 Chrono Boosts, right? So you chrono 2 Forges, for example. Now you want to chrono a Gateway or something, right? Now, you can't tell which Forge you unchronoed, so for some reason you unchronoed the wrong one, you're going to lose the game because +1 armor might not finish. Are there any thoughts about improving the way that you're going to figure out which chrono is which?
Sure, so that's actually something that we took a lot of time with. One of the things that we did that helped is increasing the cooldown on the Chrono Boost. That way, you can sort of quickly recast all your Chrono Boosts on the structures that you want, and it'll, you know, set to what they properly are. We're definitely, you know, open to more suggestions for you know, revamping it down the line, though, for sure.
Okay, but then the problem with that is that, like, you still can't really tell. That forces your Pro Toss player to force all their upgrade buildings, for example, or all their production buildings into one area, which causes, I guess, a vulnerability in your build, basically, because your Terran player could just drop where all your upgrades are because you're going to put all your stuff together.
Yeah, so it's very difficult to just like indicate, like say for example, if we link the Nexus to the thing that is chrono boosting, that gets very difficult because it's a map-wide spell. So while we don't think what we have currently is so optimal, we don't have like a really amazing solution where both graphically and both in terms of how you understand it, we're not there yet, I don't think, so we can continue exploring it. But currently our thinking is the better players who constantly move around the chrono, we made the change like Larson just talked about, so that you can reset your chronos. So at any given point of time, maybe you have 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 Nexuses at most. So players who do frequently switch can at least have that option, whereas lower level players can just set the chronos and then just kind of leave it at that. And it'll be very good in terms of I don't have to pay attention to it and so on.
All right, thanks.
Hey, so players get really excited when they see the kill count on one of their units get really high. But the backbone of really strong armies is a really big economy. So is there a way to make the mining, mineral, and gas visible on workers so newer players can kind of see the strength of drones, SCVs, and probes?
That actually isn't something that we've discussed before, but it sounds pretty cool. I think that's something we should discuss. Yeah, thanks.
Hey, so I have a question about how like promotions and MMR works. Obviously right now you need to get your MMR pretty high into the next league to get promoted. But I'm wondering if you were to introduce the divisions like you talked about, like 10 sub-leagues, would you view the promotion and demotion thresholds differently than you do for leagues?
Not entirely too differently. We're just subdividing them. So then you would move through the divisions very similarly as you would the leagues.
And just to clarify, there is no threshold when you get for promotions right now. We made that change maybe a year or two ago. So you get promoted right when you hit the border. But then demotions, there is a threshold before you get demoted.
Thank you.
Just a couple questions. First is about the separate ranks for each race, where you mentioned how Masters and GM is going to be one combined ladder. Is there any plan to allow the same person, for example, to have Terran, Protoss, Zerg in that ladder, or is there going to be some sort of restriction on that?
Currently, we're thinking there's not going to be a restriction. Based off of our stats, you have to play quite a few games in order to maintain your status in GM. So players might be able to do it, but it's going to be quite a bit of a time commitment. If it becomes an issue, we can definitely look at it.
Just a follow-up, is there any plan for, at some point, once it's finished up, the WCS or some sort of WCS system or tied in tournaments or something like that to be affected by the regional ladder?
Yeah, we're discussing it with the esports team. Currently in Heart of the Swarm, there were talks of doing something like that, but it was kind of difficult because, like Alex and Aaron talked about, the ranks were a little bit meaningless. So once we address that issue, we'll definitely have those discussions again and try to have a system where we can link the two together.
It would be awesome.
Hi guys, my question is about ladder maps. The WCS season scheduling is always hectic, and sometimes we end up with the same ladder maps for 4 to 5 months. So I was wondering if you guys in Legacy are going to move away from using the same map pool for the same amount of time as a WCS season.
Yeah, the esports team will announce their 2016 plan tomorrow, I think, on the WCS stage. And depending on the changes that happen, I think something like that is a definite possibility.
So one of the things that has been a sort of frustration for a lot of players has been the sort of Protoss deathballing or the Protoss centralization of power, especially with hero units like the Mothership Core and the Colossus that really function essentially best in an A-move sort of deathball-y kind of a way. What things do you think that you've done so far in Void that have helped disperse the Protoss power, and what kind of things may you be working on to continue that process?
So yeah, that's definitely something that we've heard a lot throughout Wings of Liberty and Heart of the Swarm. In Legacy of the Void, one of the things that we really tried to do was tone back the Colossus a little bit and put in the Disruptor to help fill that gap. The Disruptor is definitely not an A-move unit. It requires a lot more micro on both sides. So that's definitely one of the big things that we've done to address it.
I'd also mention that just the changes to the economy in general really help offset that kind of deathball-y A-move sort of thing, because if you have your entire army in one location, it's not going to be nearly as optimal as somebody who's constantly attacking the different bases, because it's more spread out and it's really hard to defend everything. So I think the economy changes have helped that as well.
Thanks.
Okay. Hello. So my question is about the ladders. I'm curious, is there still a form of MMR because I remember not too long ago, I took a pretty big break from StarCraft, and then played my placement matches again, got placed in Platinum, and then soon enough, I'm fighting Masters player, going even with them, but I'm still in Platinum. So, and it's kind of getting discouraging because I know I have to play a lot of games to get back up there, which I kind of don't have the time to. So I wonder how you're going to address that.
Actually, a while ago we did remove MMR decay. If you're experiencing it, might be something like Legacy. Someone might have had their MMR decayed and it hasn't caught up yet, but it has been removed.
Okay. Thanks.
I have a question about the ladders. So currently in the North American scene, we see a lot of the top players practicing on different servers. And I was wondering if you guys had a plan to incentivize practicing on the North American ladder.
Yeah, I think that's something that definitely came up when we talked to pros, or even when we had the community summits and things like that. But I think at the esports stage tomorrow, when they go over the plans for next year, that's definitely something that I think they're going to be talking about.
Hey, so first of all, I just want to say that you guys are awesome. Thanks for sharing everything and talking with us. I think that's really cool. Everything you guys shared is pretty awesome.
You guys are awesome.
So you guys are awesome.
Thanks. So my question is about team games. How much do you guys monitor balance for team games? I'm a big 2 versus 2 player. I got friends that play 3 versus 3. We're high level. And obviously there's combinations that seem a little more powerful than others. It seems like you guys are going to support 2 versus 2 in automated tournaments. That's awesome, thank you. But do you guys actually monitor team game balance?
Yeah, it is something that we keep an eye on, but it's always been a lower priority than 1v1 simply because 1v1 is the most played of all of our multiplayer modes. So we've tried to tackle it mostly through maps and just smaller changes, like if we see, oh, there's an issue that we can fix both in 1v1 while also helping in 2v2, we might do something like that, but we try to avoid upsetting the 1v1 balance for 2v2. With that said, it's something that we constantly keep an eye on, and it's something that we don't receive a lot of feedback on, so it's great to hear from people like you who really like our 2v2 mode.
Sweet, thanks guys.
Hello. Have you considered letting, with the new system, when you employ it, are you going to consider letting players know when they're going to move up in a, to the next level within the division, and then letting them know, hey, if you win this match, you're going to get a promotion?
We would love to do that. One thing that we talked about, one value that we have is, seasons can go pretty long, and how do we introduce some stories, some nice stories in there? So like one thing we would want is you go on the load screen, and we match 2 people who are going to get promoted into maybe gold if they win the match. And then it's a promotion match. Whoever wins this gets into gold, something like that would be awesome. It's not necessarily something we can do right now, but we were looking into it.
Well, and I don't know if I missed this, but are mid-season demotions also being considered outside of just GM Master?
Yes, we are considering it. We're going to try to find a good way to introduce it. It goes well with our goals of accuracy. We don't want people to get into like platinum. They lose a bunch, and then now they're going against like silver players. There are some nice things that we like about having no demotions. Like people who feel like a demotion's coming on, and then they stop playing for the rest of the season. But we're going to try to find good ways to deal with it.
All right, thank you.
And I think that one really depends, like Desro brought up, if we decide to reduce the season duration, then maybe we don't need to enable demotions again, right? So it really depends on the length of the seasons, I think.
Thank you, guys.
Hi guys. In World of Warcraft, in like late game raiding, combat logs are a really valuable tool for sort of doing a post-mortem deconstruction of like what could we do better, what did we do wrong, but also in sort of deconstructing how the spells work, especially after patches. Have you guys ever thought about bringing combat logs to StarCraft?
So, not extensively, but that kind of thing is something that we have talked about, and one of our preferred ways to do things like that is to put tools in your hands, like through the editor. It's pretty difficult right now for us to do that with replays, although, for example, you can make a map that keeps track of all of the damage that's being done, minerals spent, etc., and you can get some stats that way, but in a 1v1 ladder game, which is where you'd probably want that the most, it's not something that we have right now, but it's definitely something we'll keep in mind in the future.
Cool, thanks guys.
Alright, so there's actually a lot of Protoss players recently have been massing adepts and then making mass carriers because mass carriers is a very viable strategy, and the reason it wasn't very viable in Heart of the Swarm is because we couldn't get up to that mass carrier without harassment. So adepts are allowing us to get that mass carrier before the other player can do anything about it, and also I see that a lot because I think that other strategies aren't very viable in Legacy of the Void. They don't scale well with like Zerg or Terran other strategies. What are you guys doing to improve that, and what are you guys going to do about the Adept so that we can't just mass it and get mass carriers?
Yeah, so those are 2 units specifically that we're actually keeping a really close eye on. Towards the end of the beta, we made tweaks to the carrier and the Adept both, so we think we put it in a better spot. We may not be there completely yet, but we're definitely keeping an eye on it.
All right, thank you.
Hi guys, any plans on adding statistics such as win percentage as Zerg, as Terran, as random into Battle.net?
I believe we have stats in there. If you go to your profile, the ladder section, there's a statistics tab. It has a lot of the win percentages within there. And then within our tournaments, we're displaying your opponent's win rate on their maps as well too.
Okay, thank you.
It is a little bit buried.
Do you guys plan on adding a penalty for deranking, like losing games like in a row to bring your MMR down?
You mean to bring it down a little bit faster?
No, like when people like purposely leave games to bring their MMR down.
Sorry, what is the question again?
Like, do you guys plan on adding a penalty when people leave too much, like within the first 5 seconds?
When we discuss penalties for that type of behavior, it's kind of difficult to figure out what the right penalty would be. If we chose not to change their MMR, we could run into a lot of aberrant behavior. But we have discussed it. Like maybe we don't change if they do this in Masters. You know, you do lose MMR, but like once you do this towards the bottom, we don't care as much, and then we won't move their MMR, and that way you can't lost bot and get down and stomp noobs.
And currently, I do believe we have something in place right now where if you haven't played at least a minimum number of minutes, then you actually don't win or lose points, or maybe it was MMR. It was one of those two things. Yeah, you don't lose the MMR, so you can't really lost spot like that, like you're saying. But that specific number, because of the worker changes and so on, we would definitely have to see where we land right now and re-evaluate. And then if there's any good ideas to prevent this type of aberrant behavior, we'll be grateful to hear it.
Thank you.
Hello. I haven't. Oh wow, that is weird. I haven't seen a lot of good positive comments on the forums. Like I've seen them from scrolling down a lot, but the negative comments seem to get +1 a lot more. So I was thinking if there's anything you guys could do to make it more present that there are those supportive, positive comments, because when I was going through and seeing those negative comments, like you guys didn't listen to us and stuff, I haven't. It makes it kind of, it feels kind of real in a sense, and I think with a more positive community, that's how we can get a better game.
Yeah, so I do think that we actually do receive a lot of really constructive comments in addition to the negative ones, but what we've actually found is that by really communicating as much as we can, that people have gotten a lot more positive. We've had a lot better engagement, and we've seen less of those comments, and more often they get downvoted these days than they used to in the past. So currently we're thinking that just by being a lot more open and involving more people, this type of interaction is less likely to happen, that people are more likely to join in and be positive.
And I'd like to just add, a lot of people who post sort of like negative, more on the negative side, like you say, like deep down, we believe that majority of those people really want to see StarCraft 2 to become as great as it could be, right? So, but like you said, when someone new comes into the forums and he sees like all the negativity, it's not a very good experience, and chances of him joining StarCraft 2, which we want, and which even the people who are being negative on the forums also want that, right? So we would like to just kind of ask for your help to be a little bit more thinking about along those lines. So like you don't have to be super negative for us to listen to your feedback. We try our best across both our teams and our community teams to listen to every feedback as much as possible. So if you guys can keep in mind and help us out in that area for the better of the game, I think that'd be great.
Also, I think maybe adding a like rather than just a like button, add a constructive like button. So if it's constructive or positive, you can say, oh, hey, this one's good. And that would also give a factor of how high up it goes on the comment section.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. We'll discuss it with the web team and the community team and see where we can improve that process. Thanks.
All right, hi guys. Can you talk more about specifically about balancing challenges and learnings with Archon mode, specific to Archon mode?
So currently, because Archon mode is not in a same state as 1v1, like 1v1 is in a very unique place because all the esport tournaments happen around 1v1 and so on. So it's a little bit similar to what Aaron talked about with team games. We don't put as big of, like this game has to be super balanced so that tournament matches have to be fair on it. But if it's the case that Archon mode really takes off on that scene, then obviously we'll take the same sort of approach to Archon mode balance as we do for 1v1.
I'll also mention that we used Archon mode a lot while testing in Legacy of the Void, and we did find that it plays out a little bit differently. Like multitasking is a lot, like actions that require multitasking are a lot easier to perform in Archon mode than they are in 1v1. And so the games do play out a little bit differently, and so I think it's actually kind of an interesting thing of looking at how much, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Basically, I think that it is different, but it's also kind of cool in a way, and the games are actually pretty action-packed, so I kind of like to see some professional level Archon.
Hey guys, thanks for all your work on StarCraft. And my question is basically, I'm not affected by it too much because I'm like a gold-ish level player, but at the highest levels, when I'm watching streams, sometimes they'll play replays, and you can clearly see that hacking is still happening in the community, and it does affect ranked play, so it is relevant to kind of the discussion. And I know that with the new release of the new client and everything, it was really good for a little while, but I know that they're slowly integrating back into the system, and I was wondering if there's anything you guys are doing to further stem that, or like if you hired someone permanently for that or whatever.
We actually did hire someone recently to work on hacks more, and it's something that we're very committed to. In fact, we're going to be continuing to do whatever we can through patches, through investigations, and it's something that you can help out with as well. Whenever you see somebody hacking, make sure to report them through the client for hacking. You can send replays to hacks@blizzard.com. Replays are really helpful for us to investigate. If we just hear, oh, this guy hacked, it's a little bit harder to track down, oh, this specific game, this was the issue. So yeah, I think things can go a lot better now with all of the stuff.
Thanks.
We're also trying to find ways to give you more feedback if you do report a hacker, that person was indeed a hacker and we did ban them.
Cool. Thanks so much for coming to our panel, and let's continue working together so that Legacy of the Void can be as awesome as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending the StarCraft II Legacy of the Void competitive multiplayer panel.